What would make Jennifer Hudson reach out to David Otunga after all these years? And why would their son suddenly become the center of the conversation? One phone call might sound completely ordinary, but when it involves two high-profile parents and a child, even the smallest detail can ignite a storm of speculation. Jennifer and David have been connected for years through their son, David Daniel Otunga Jr. But now questions are beginning to circulate about whether Jennifer may have reached out to David to discuss their son, parenting responsibilities, or even custody arrangements. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Is there actually a new custody dispute developing behind the scenes? Was there really a recent conversation between Jennifer and David? Or has social media taken old information, added dramatic headlines, and created a story that sounds far more explosive than the reality? Tonight, we're taking a closer look at what is known, what is being claimed, and what remains unconfirmed. Because when a child is involved, the truth can be far more complicated than a viral headline makes it seem. And if Jennifer really did reach out to David, perhaps the biggest question isn't who is right, who is wrong, or who could win. Perhaps the real question is much more important. What is best for their son? Stay with us because we're going deeper into Jennifer and David's history, the custody questions, the rumors surrounding their family, and the reason this story has people asking, what could really be happening behind closed doors? Jennifer Hudson and David Otunga were once a couple who seemed to be building a future together. And their relationship eventually brought them the one connection that would last far beyond their romance: their son, David Daniel Otunga Jr. For a time, Jennifer and David were one of the celebrity couples people couldn't stop talking about. From the outside, it looked like they were creating a family and planning a life together, but as we all know, relationships don't always end the way people expect. In 2017, their engagement came to an end, and suddenly, a relationship that had once been filled with plans for the future became a story about two parents learning how to move forward separately. But here's where their situation became very different from an ordinary breakup. They shared a child. Jennifer and David couldn't simply walk away from each other's lives. No matter what happened between them personally, they would always have a reason to communicate, make decisions, and navigate the responsibilities of parenthood together. And because both of them are public figures, every development naturally attracted attention. A private disagreement could become a headline. A simple conversation could turn into speculation. And an ordinary parenting decision could suddenly be described online as a custody battle. Over the years, various stories and claims about their family arrangements have circulated. But here's the important part. Not every dramatic headline tells the complete story. When children are involved, custody isn't simply about one parent winning and another losing. It can involve parenting schedules, school decisions, holidays, travel, communication, responsibilities, and countless private details that the public may never see. And that's why the latest speculation about Jennifer potentially reaching out to David deserves a closer look. Is she really trying to address a custody issue? Is there an actual disagreement happening behind the scenes? Or could this simply be two parents communicating about their son, just as they have had to do for years? Until reliable information confirms what's actually happening, we shouldn't assume the most dramatic version of the story is true. But one thing is certain. Whenever Jennifer Hudson and David Otunga are connected by a story involving their son, the public immediately starts asking questions. And this time, those questions may lead to a much bigger story than anyone expected. Now imagine this for a moment. Jennifer Hudson picks up her phone, sees David Otunga's name, and pauses before making the call. Whatever the reason, she knows that a conversation involving their son isn't something to take lightly. But what exactly would make her reach out now? That's the question that has people wondering what could be happening behind the scenes. Maybe it's something completely ordinary, a change in their son's schedule, an upcoming school event, travel plans, a family occasion, or simply another decision that two co-parents need to make together. But then there's another possibility. What if something has changed? What if there is a disagreement that needs to be addressed before it becomes something bigger? And what if this conversation isn't about fighting at all, but about trying to find common ground? That's where the story becomes interesting. Because the internet has a way of taking one simple interaction and turning it into something explosive. A private conversation can suddenly become, Jennifer Hudson calls David Otunga over custody. And before anyone knows the full story, people are already imagining lawyers, courtrooms, and a major custody battle. But is that really what's happening? Or could the truth be far less dramatic? The reality is that a phone call between two parents does not automatically mean a custody war. In fact, reaching out could mean the exact opposite, that Jennifer and David are trying to communicate before a disagreement grows into something more serious. And if Jennifer really did contact David about their son, perhaps the most important part of that conversation wasn't what they disagreed about, but what they were both willing to do to find a solution. Because sometimes the most important family decisions happen quietly, long before the public ever hears about them. And if there is more to this story, the question becomes, what was important enough to make Jennifer pick up the phone in the first place? And this is where the story becomes even more intriguing. If Jennifer Hudson really did reach out to David Otunga about their son, David Daniel, what could have been said during that conversation? Imagine the tension of two parents sitting down, or speaking privately over the phone, knowing that every decision they make could affect their child. The subject wouldn't simply be about schedules or plans anymore. It could involve parenting responsibilities, time with their son, important decisions about his future, and questions about how they continue to handle custody as co-parents. But here's the part that makes people wonder. Was Jennifer asking for something to change? Was she simply trying to understand David's position? Or could she have been trying to make sure that both parents were on the same page about David Daniel? We don't know what was said behind closed doors, and there is no reliable confirmation of the details of any recent private conversation. But that's exactly why the speculation has become so interesting. When two parents have a complicated history and share a child, even a simple discussion can carry a lot of emotional weight. Jennifer may have concerns. David may have his own perspective. And somewhere in the middle is their son, whose well-being should remain the priority. What makes this even more dramatic is the possibility that the conversation could have been less about winning custody and more about finding a workable arrangement. Because custody isn't necessarily about one parent taking everything from the other. It can be about communication, schedules, responsibilities, and making sure a child has stability. So if Jennifer really did approach David about David Daniel, perhaps the real issue wasn't who gets custody. Perhaps it was, how do we make this work for our son? And that question could be far more important than any headline circulating online. Because while the internet may be waiting for a dramatic showdown, the reality behind the scenes could be two parents trying to navigate a complicated situation privately. And until either Jennifer or David confirms what actually happened, one thing remains certain: there is much more we don't know than we do. But what happens if the conversation between Jennifer Hudson and David Otunga doesn't lead to an agreement? What if, after discussing David Daniel's future, both parents realize that they simply cannot see eye to eye? This is where the situation could become much more serious. Imagine Jennifer sitting quietly after the conversation, looking at old photographs of her son and wondering what the next step should be. Across town, David could be facing the same difficult decision, knowing that any legal action would bring even more attention to a situation that both parents might prefer to keep private. And then comes the question neither parent wants to face. Do they take the matter to court? If an agreement could not be reached, a legal custody process could become an option, but there is no reliable confirmation that Jennifer and David are currently doing so. Still, imagine the emotional weight of that possibility. A courtroom would not simply represent a legal disagreement. It would mean two parents trying to protect what they believe is best for their son, while having their private family circumstances placed under intense public scrutiny. Jennifer might remember the moments when David Daniel was younger. The first smiles, the first milestones, the memories that no courtroom could ever replace. David could be thinking about his own relationship with his son and the fear that a legal battle might change their lives forever. And somewhere between those emotions is David Daniel himself, the child at the heart of every decision. Picture the silence before a court hearing, the tension of waiting for a decision, and two parents realizing that whatever happens next could affect their family for years to come. But here's the emotional twist. Even if parents disagree, that doesn't necessarily mean they stop loving their child or wanting the best for him. Sometimes the hardest decisions are made precisely because both sides believe they're protecting someone they love. That's why, if a custody dispute ever did reach that stage, the biggest question wouldn't simply be who wins the case. It would be whether Jennifer and David could eventually put the conflict behind them and create a stable path forward for their son. And perhaps that's what makes this entire situation so emotional. Because behind every legal document, every headline, and every courtroom argument, there is a family trying to figure out how to move forward. But would Jennifer and David really take that step? Or could they still find a way to settle their differences before the courtroom doors ever open? So, after all the questions, rumors, and speculations surrounding Jennifer Hudson, David Otunga, and their son David Daniel, one thing remains clear. There is a much bigger story behind the headlines. Jennifer and David may have to communicate about their son for years to come, but whether their conversations are about everyday parenting, custody arrangements, or a disagreement that needs to be resolved remains unclear unless they choose to confirm it publicly. And that's what makes this story so emotional. Behind the celebrity names and dramatic headlines are two parents who share a child and a history that cannot simply be erased. If disagreements do exist, the hope would be that they can find a solution that puts David Daniel's well-being first. Because at the end of the day, this isn't really about Jennifer versus David. It isn't about who wins a headline or who gets the most public support. It's about a son who deserves stability, privacy, and the love of both parents. And perhaps the biggest question isn't whether this story ends in a courtroom. It's whether Jennifer and David can find common ground before it ever gets that far. Now it's your turn. What do you think about the situation? Do you believe Jennifer and David could resolve their differences privately? Or do you think a custody dispute could eventually become a bigger issue? Remember, the details of any recent custody conversation or legal action have not been independently confirmed, so keep that in mind before believing every headline you see online. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy celebrity stories, relationship updates, and dramatic commentary that separates rumors from confirmed information, hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay with us for the next update. Because when the story changes, we'll be here to break it down.